Hey, this is Joel with American Giants. I thought this week we would do some International Fiberglass history. We are all familiar with the Muffler Men. We talk often about the Bunions, the Phillips 66 Cowboys, the Vikings. We all know what the main figures are. SO Tigers are very popular, the Santas that we've done videos on. I thought in this episode we could talk a little bit more about some of the items that International Fiberglass made that are just not that common. A great example of this is the traffic stopper that's in the museum. I want to do an entire episode about this guy, but he is one of the many figures that International Fiberglass made that people just don't connect with the Muffler Men. They don't know that the history is all connected there. And I thought today we'd also look at some other items that you may have seen before, but that you may have no idea originated in the same place, Venice, California, in the mid to late 60s. One of the rarest giants not normally associated with International Fiberglass are the traffic stoppers, also coined the Professionals by Deborah Jane Seltzer on her website, because a number of these were made to be doctors, scientists, chefs, and mechanics, all professionals in their field. International Fiberglass called them traffic stoppers, but they also called a number of different items traffic stoppers as well. The most common was a man with a hat and sometimes a bow tie that stood at a gas station such as DX or Mobil. The men were about 10 feet tall, and many of them had a motor inside, and their arm would wave to get the attention of the passing car. The figures were dressed formal and had a professional look to them, and were shorter and easier to manage and set up. International Fiberglass often took them to trade shows and displayed them in the booth, but they did not catch on or sell as well as the larger Muffler Men. At some point, International Fiberglass made a whole series of these men for different occupations. It is not remembered where this series of figures went, but there were doctors and scientists and chefs, to name a few. Most of the ones made seemed to be the gas station variety and stood on the street in front of gas stations to get the family car to make a stop. If you are looking for these today, you will find one on display at the American Giants Museum, and although most people don't know what he is one of the most rare and hard to find International Fiberglass figures out there. Over the years, collectors have managed to find a few other examples of these figures, with one appearing in 2023 on eBay. Another rare item not normally associated with International Fiberglass are the funny face animal heads. These detailed and realistic animal heads were made out of fiberglass and designed to sit atop 50-gallon barrels that were trash cans. The idea was to encourage children to properly discard their trash at parks, playgrounds, and fairs. The program was a success, and dozens of these animal heads were sold nationwide. Unlike the Giants, these were much easier and smaller to ship, and you could order a set or just one kind. There were 5 animal heads total in the set, and these included an elephant, lion, panda, hippo, and most rare, a crocodile. International Fiberglass hired various artists to make their products, and Michael McCracken was the man who got the contract for these animal heads. McCracken is known for a number of very lifelike figures made for the company, and he even appears in advertising photos for the animal heads. Today, you can still occasionally find these animal heads, with the hippo being the most common. Much harder to find are the rare crocodile heads, because these were not as popular and less were made. The massive tire made by International Fiberglass is one of my favorites, mostly just because they aren't heavily sought after or recognized as part of the Muffler Man family. Tire shops across the country ordered them, and they did all right in the 60s and were a common sight up on a sign or on the roof of a shop. The Garvin Tire Company used one of these that appears in early International Fiberglass advertising. The tires were made in half pieces, and you could purchase just a half or 2 halves and make an entire tire if desired. The tires came in a variety of colors, and you could even buy one of the trailers normally used to haul the Muffler Men if you wanted your big tire to be mobile. Today, less than 10 of these tires are known to still exist, and American Giants does own a half of one we may incorporate into the American Giants Museum in the future. While many collectors concentrate on finding one of the Esso tigers made by International Fiberglass, few realize they altered the mold a bit to also create a cougar. These much less common animals differ a bit from the tigers in a few ways. The tigers had a mane or a beard that was removed for the cougars, and the paint job was much simpler for the cougars. These were not used by gas stations like the Esso tigers, but instead often used at amusement parks or zoos. The one in our collection is unrestored, but came from the Great Danbury Fair in Connecticut, and is the only cougar version known to have survived. An almost unknown sculpture by International Fiberglass is called the Space Saddle. It is a piece of fiberglass playground equipment designed by Jim Miller Melberg. Jim was an artist who did his independent studies in England and France in the early 50s. He spent time training under Osip Zadkin in his sculpture studio and went on to design playground sculptures that can be found all over the world and America. Many of his designs were made in concrete, but he also worked with International Fiberglass at some point to create the sculptures in fiberglass. We know that these were featured in International Fiberglass marketing and being sold in the late 60s. Today, most of this vintage-style playground equipment has been removed and replaced, but in rare cases you can still find space saddles today. The hot dog is another extremely rare and most likely unsuccessful figure made. There is very little historical information on this character, but we believe it was a prototype for a future business or restaurant that just never materialized the way International Fiberglass hoped it would. There is an artist's sketch of what it would have looked like, but very few actual uses of the figure. A handful of pictures exist showing it being made in the late 60s, but there are never more than one in a picture. Only two are known to exist, one at south of the border in South Carolina, which seems to be made out of concrete and has incorrect feet, and the other was in New Mexico. I'll do more of these videos about rare items made by International Fiberglass in the future, but we will wrap up this episode with Car Wash City. There were many projects in the 60s that were constructed but simply fell through or had a very short life. We tend to focus on the big programs that were successful, but some of these short-lived projects are fascinating. Car Wash City Incorporated is a short-lived or never materialized business that we know International Fiberglass did work for. I have been unsuccessful in finding any history on it or where it was located, but 4 of these fiberglass cars were made and ordered to sit atop the structure. To my knowledge, none of these cars have survived, but you never know what is out there. I think what makes this unique in all these items that they made is that was 50 plus years ago. So while many of the items were in abundance in the 60s and maybe the 70s, and you remember them at Jellystone campgrounds and amusement parks and golf courses and such, today they are much harder to find. The numbers on these figures are actually really interesting, with how many like Santas remain and how many tigers remain, and then all the smaller items that International Fiberglass made and how many are left. Some of the rare pieces that we see photographic evidence of are completely gone, while others I thought were gone until just last year in 2024, when maybe 1 or 2 of certain kinds were found. So use this video as kind of a reference of what was made, and that'll help us all keep an eye open and an eye out for the remaining items that still exist today.